What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, might as well start by talking about the big Liberal confab over the weekend. Pablo Rodriguez rolling out the support package. What is it? More than 40 members are now in his camp?
And you can tell that news just hit the province like wildfire.
Boy, did it ever, yeah.
The whole thing. It's so crazy, though, eh? Because you and I were talking about this, I think, on Friday, and we were looking at the agenda and said, for a party that is about as popular as anthrax with Francophone voters in Quebec, it really seems to be spending a lot of time paying attention to Anglophone voters who, one would think, despite all of their double crosses and throwing under the bus, would still be firmly in the Liberals' pocket. And you look at the coverage over the weekend, and you'd see the headline in the Gazette, it's like Bill 96 and real Liberals reaffirm commitment to Anglophone. And you're thinking, okay, that's the Gazette being the Gazette. But then you look at the headlines in the French language media, and they're pretty much the same. In other words, Liberals would weaken or water down Bill 96, which I'm not entirely sure was the message they should have been giving this weekend. If anything, you're supposed to be sparking some excitement over the clash of ideas or whatever that will be forming the next version, the next iteration of the Quebec Liberal Party. And we have to remember that all of the stuff that they talked about this weekend could be brushed aside with the wave of the hand of the new leader. They are not bound by any of it. But my God, what are they talking about? Well, they're resurrecting that absolutely, do not drive or operate heavy machinery after this debate, but, creating a Quebec constitution. They're talking about the third link between Quebec City and Lévis. I know they're meeting in Lévis, but for God's sakes, Aaron, I think even the people in Lévis and Quebec City are fed up with that. And, of course, for a bit of inspiration, they bring in Philippe Couillard. Yes, that Philippe Couillard, the Premier of Quebec, who presided over the single worst defeat in Quebec Liberal history, which basically resulted in that this listless, directionless 19-seat for now, a political formation that still doesn't seem to know what it wants to be when it grows up. You would think at least there'd be some mise en scène. Politics is spectacle. Politics is show business. You think there would have been at least some kind of mise en scène that would say, okay, this is where we have to go. And, for the party of the economy, I was looking high and low, and I apologize in advance if I missed it. If I missed it, it must have lasted like 3 or 4 minutes. I didn't hear that much talk about the economy. I didn't hear that much talk about why Quebecers would be better off with a Liberal government in terms of their finances, in terms of the economy. None of that was there. Just a lot of kind of nerdish, how many M&As can dance on the head of a pin. Doesn't bode well for the future as far as I'm concerned, and I'm really hoping that they throw some gas on that fire and get some enthusiasm going, at least for the leadership campaign, because at this point, it's not a matter that people turn around and say, no, I don't like the Liberal Party. People are just going to turn around and say, I don't care about the Liberal Party. And that's even worse.
I will point out the one thing I found curious, or maybe it's not. There was very little, I know Denis Coderre was there, but very little anything about him.
The only line I saw from Denis Coderre was that he would maintain Bill 21, but he scrapped Bill 96. I don't know the details. And it's like, really? But then again, the same thing. All eyes are on Pablo Rodriguez.
Right.
This is the guy, even though they seem to be ganging up on him, sort of equating the accomplishments of the Trudeau government along with Mr. Rodriguez. I heard you trying to say, being sarcastic last week, saying, that was then, but this is now. Now he's a provincial Liberal, whatever. It will be impossible to undo that knot. So we'll see how he's going to deal with that. But above and beyond everything else, Aaron, quite apart from the glaring absence of any female candidates, although, frankly, the way they treated their last female incumbent, I wouldn't blame a woman for not wanting to get involved with the Quebec Liberal Party. But all that said, I just didn't get a sense that this is a party that's going anywhere. I didn't get the sense that this is a party that's ready to lead or even ready to present a public face. It still hasn't figured out what it wants to be after it got its butt kicked not once but twice. But, it's kind of sad.
But Jim, to your point, though, whoever the eventual leader is going to be, that's the person who will then tell us what he's planning or she's planning to do, whoever turns out. So maybe up until then, we shouldn't expect a whole lot.
Well, shouldn't we at least, shouldn't we be hearing something from the Liberals that will attract our interest? I know, though, people say, no, don't worry. Once the leader's chosen, events will happen very, very quickly. Yes, they will. But here, please be careful. Everyone who thinks that, it might still be, I don't know, God help us, 2018 or 2015, I think those days are gone. I think you're going to see a lot of left turns and a lot of surprises on the way to the next election. And quite frankly, who knows who's going to be good looking for the next government. And you're going to think I'm kind of crazy here, but it wouldn't surprise me the way that the bottom seems to drop out of Quebec political parties so quickly, and even indeed the PQ is no longer under the glorious life that it was enjoying. You know what? Honestly, Aaron, I don't think we've heard the last about CJAD.
Well, he's done a good job of at least keeping his name in the news for someone who doesn't have any members in there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got no M&As, but he should. I mean, that's just our brilliant, electoral system. But no, he didn't get frozen out in terms of drawing a vote. And be careful, because the guy does talk about the economy. Be careful, because the guy does talk about what's on people's minds. And I hate to cite this as an example, but if we look at what happened last week south of the border, you better pay attention. Yeah. It may not be the sexiest thing you want to talk about. It may not fit in with the topics of conversation for your Saint-Cassette cocktail party, but guess what? If that's what's on people's minds, they're going to go out and vote for whoever appeals to that, no matter how crazy that person may appear to be.
All right, let me move on and talk about the story. We did an interview with the head of the Montreal Port Authority early in the afternoon. So here you go. 1,200 people working in these jobs are now locked out. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't pay much attention to a strike and hope that it'd be resolved. But as they keep saying, this is about a strike that's costing Montreal $400 million a day. And you kind of wonder what the federal labor minister is doing, sitting on his hands and not doing anything about this up until now.
Well, I guarantee you, I'd say by the end of the week, we'll see back-to-work legislation of some kind. You recall that the federal labor minister, when it looked like the railways were going to go, decided to force binding arbitration with a little-known article of the Federal Labor Code. But here's the thing. I mean, the Montreal Board of Trade said today, this is proof once again that the operations that support the supply chain should be designated essential services. Yeah. Okay, that's swell. I'm in favor of that. Here's the thing. If you're going to have that, you're going to have work conditions, salary conditions that can be guaranteed and are not subject to negotiation. I can't think of any maritime employer associations that's going to sit still for that, or any union that would sit still for that. And indeed, if you turn around and say, well, no, we should freeze those work conditions, well, no one's going to come and work for you. So we're in a bit of a cleft stick here. But clearly, one thing that is showing up is certainly for the Port of Montreal, for all I know, Vancouver, but certainly for the Port of Montreal, labor relations are not good. And this is not a good situation to have when you have an undertaking which is so absolutely and literally vital to our day-to-day existence. This is not overstating the case, Aaron. We get a lot of stuff that comes through that port. Already, the first headline that made my heart skip a beat is we'll probably already see shortages at the SAQ because of this first day of this lockout. But there you go, and you are going to see shortages simply because it won't get here. Or if it does get here, as your guest said, the lady from the Port of Montreal, it's going to go through New York. It's going to go through Savannah. It'll take longer, and guess what? Transport costs, it's going to cost more.
Sure.
So this is where we are. But all that said, I think we should take a long, hard look at the various activities that guarantee our supply chain's existence and decide what really is essential and how we can make sure that people will want to work in that particular sector. It is so crazily important. And if you don't know now, trust me, folks, give it 3 days. You're going to know. You're going to see the difference right off the bat. And it won't just be traffic jams with trucks, unladen trucks, or ships stuck in port. We're gonna, if this place, all the economic boots in the head this city has taken, this is the last thing it needs. And yet, it seems just in time for Christmas, Aaron. circumstances are going to jump off the third turnbuckle and throw a flying elbow into Montreal's face.
Nicely done, Jim.
You like that?
Always nice to involve a wrestling term into our discussion. Last thing, I started by asking just after 2, and I'll come back to this now. I have a clip from Christian Dubé when he was speaking last week after being MIA for quite a while, and suggested actually that, you know what, things in the healthcare system are actually pretty good, and it's the public, it's you and me, who are making things seem worse than they actually are. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think to a certain extent he's right. And I've mentioned this on air that, depending on your circumstances, I have, as I mentioned, I have become more involved with the medical system in the past couple of years than I have ever. And fully, dreading the experience and discovering that, it tends to, the basic stuff works. I understand that for various procedures, there are ridiculous wait times and whatever. And certainly, go beyond the ER. The ER is not the only manifestation of the Quebec health system. Whether it's getting tests, whether it's dealing with your CLSCs, it's something I had never done before, and it is surprisingly efficient, surprisingly painless. I'm not saying it's like that across the board, but I have a sneaking suspicion that there is a kernel of truth in what Dubé is saying. That said, what will Agence, Santé Québec, what will these private sector mandarins do to the system, and how much resistance are they going to meet? How much will my opinion change once their grubby little fingerprints are all over the system? We'll see what happens. But for the time being, I think, to a certain extent, we are our own worst enemies. You should at least go into it with an open mind, especially if it's your first visit to the system.
All right, we'll leave it at that. That's my question. Jim, thank you.